One of the big things among many that Jesus brings to a church and to hearts and to individuals when he is in the house and when he's in your life is an awareness of others. You can't serve Jesus Christ and not be aware of others. You have to have a heart transformed by him to feel that way. But the message for today is that Jesus is compassion. Jesus is compassion, and because Jesus has changed our hearts, we're compassionate people. The worst disease in the Old Testament was leprosy. It's a terrible disease. The last leper colony that I knew of was in Hawaii. If you're going on vacation there this summer, maybe stop by. But it's a terrible disease. It literally causes your skin to rot off, your fingers rot off, your nose, the tip of your nose rots off. Got to be careful with that, what I just did there. And it stinks, and it's rancid, and it's nasty. And armadillos have it, so stay away from armadillos, people. Just run them over! Or shoot them for the welfare of all mankind. Somebody raise your hand, receive that word today. No, seriously, armadillos do carry the leprosy virus at times. So when somebody with leprosy pranced up like, hey, y'all having dinner? Like, get out of here, you're disgusting. That's how they were treated. And so we see Jesus as the great example to us in Mark chapter 1 here, and a leper, somebody who has this terrible condition, runs up to him, out of breath, throws himself down at Jesus' feet, sweaty. It says in Mark 1:40, man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. If you're willing, you can make me clean. You can heal me and make me clean, and he said. And so Jesus, 41, moved with, say that word with me. Say it again, white people. Move with compassion. Jesus reached out and touched him. Okay, you're not supposed to touch lepers, they're nasty. He didn't have like Purell, like, hold on a second. He touched him before he was clean. He touched him before he had been made suitable for public consumption. He touched him before he was presentable. I'm going to use air quotes all day today. He was moved with compassion. Jesus reached out and touched him before he was healed and said, I am willing, be healed. And instantly the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. That's what compassion looks like. It's reaching out to touch without thinking of self. It's reaching out to help. It's extending yourself in love without being concerned for self. That's what compassion looks like. So Barbara Bush passed away this week at 92 years old. Her and George Bush were married some 73 years. Can you believe that? And I'm from Indiana. And there was a kid in Indiana named Ryan White. You don't remember this probably, but it was in the mid-90s. And this kid from Kokomo, Indiana, he had a blood transfusion because he was a hemophiliac. He got a blood transfusion, and he got the AIDS virus. He got HIV, then AIDS, and he died. All of northern Indiana was extremely intense about catching the AIDS. We would run around on the playground declaring somebody had AIDS and playing tag. Oh, nobody put us through sensitivity classes back in the day. I had a family member who contracted the HIV virus and died of AIDS. I remember living through that with my grandmother the moment she heard about this member of our family, holding her as she cried. I was just a child. I was just a kid. It was intense. There was a lot of misinformation about AIDS back in 1998. And so newly elected First Lady, Barbara Bush, and one of the first things she ever did, she went to in Washington, D.C. with not Princess Leia, but Princess Diana, whatever her name is. She went to a pediatric AIDS care center in Washington, and this picture came away from that. This baby has the HIV virus, and there's Barbara Bush hugging and loving that child. She then interacted with adults that had HIV, and it really resonated powerfully in a time of hysteria when it came to AIDS. And she said this with her actions: you can hug and pick up AIDS babies and people who have the HIV virus without hurting yourself. She said there is a need for compassion. Compassion is extending yourself. Compassion is caring about others more than yourself. Jesus puts that in our hearts. The answer to every marriage conflict is compassion. The answer to every family squabble is compassion. It's entering into the life of another and seeing the world from their perspective. It's entering into the life of another and caring about their experience enough to share their pain, to share their struggle. Does that make sense? It's a guy named Lou Fook. He was a missionary back in the day, had a good life, had a great setup in his own life. But he began to be troubled by a group of slaves in South Africa called the Coolies. He wanted to reach them. God put a supernatural burden in his heart for the coolies in the South African mines, these slaves who worked in terrible conditions. And missionary Lou Fook went to South Africa and voluntarily sold himself into slavery in order to convert coolies in the South African mines of that day. And his life was spent toiling as a slave. And when he died, there were hundreds of coolies who understood, loved, and worshiped Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. That is what compassion looks like. That's the bar set pretty high, honestly. Like, we gotta be moved with compassion like Jesus. It's easy to get hard-hearted. It's easy to be emotionally dull. It's easy to not have care and concern for others as a part of your regular thought process. How many know what I'm talking about? Let somebody else handle it. Let the government handle it. They made bad choices, whatever. I have sat in racially charged gatherings where either side has been spoken to, kind of try to position myself in the middle to understand the complications of racial tension in America. And what I've recognized from one side is they think people who are suffering made bad choices, are bad people, didn't do well. But then when you go into the other environment and hear people talking about their experience, they see people who are suffering as good people who had difficulty starting, who had everything stacked against them. There is this tension, and the only way that will change is for compassion to arise and enter into the experience of another. That's it. Embrace the awkward conversation. Embrace the idea that you may not understand everything they've been through. Your experience may not be somebody else's experience. And the church said yes. And so we must be moved like Jesus with compassion. Like we got to care about people. This church will die if we stop caring about people. I am not trying to build something that has legs when it comes to money and status and fame and all that. This is being built to help people. It's compassion. It's not. There's not enough good on the other side if it doesn't help people. Do you understand what I'm saying? It ain't worth it if people are not helped by Jesus. That has to be the core of what we do. Hear my heart, hear my guts on that. And so Matthew 9:35 says, Jesus went through the towns, all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God, and healing every disease. Say every disease. Jesus is a healer. Jesus cares about people. And so when he saw the crowds, how many of you love crowds? Yeah. How many, if you go to a movie and it's like pretty empty, you're high-fiving each other like, yeah, I mean, it's going to be great. Like, I ain't going, there's a crowd. If I drive by, like if I have to go like 4 or 5 times a year, I have to go to a super Walmart. Like I go at 8 o'clock in the morning where nobody's there. I don't want to go, when it's stacked up 30 people deep at the checkout line. But when Jesus saw the unwashed masses, when Jesus saw people that the Bible says were harassed and helpless, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. They were full of needs. They were full of issues. They were full of lack. And Jesus still said, oh no, that's not too much for me. Jesus had compassion. When our hearts are changed, and as they're progressively changed by loving, knowing, worshiping, and serving Jesus Christ, our hearts that would walk away will soon not be able to walk away because Jesus changes your heart. I was mean to my wife when we first got married. If I knew something bothered her and if she hadn't taken her Act Right pills, that's a theoretical thing. If she wasn't acting right, I'd be like, oh, you ain't acting right. Well, I'll just throw a grenade into our home in order to punish you for not acting right like I think you should. Over time and lots of discussion, and I use that word loosely, Jesus changed my heart to where I don't want to fight with her. I want to love her. We still find ways to get it in. Have a little conflict just to keep things spicy. Especially if she wants to talk to me too late in the day. Like after 11 o'clock, I'm done. My words are gone. Don't want to speak to you. I love you. I'm going to bed. So our hearts have to shift toward compassion as we follow, as we serve, as we love Jesus. The government ain't going to take care of people, folks. The government is not going to take care of people. We need to desire to help those and care for those that need justice. And it's not something, this is not a political message, this is a Jesus message. We need to have a movement in our heart that something moves, something changes, something promotes us to action. We have to have deep feelings and make decisions, not with our head, but with our heart. And you can do that. I don't make a lot of heart decisions unless it's for Renee or the kids. But you can do it. We need to do it. Lauryn Hill is probably greatest, she's definitely the greatest female MC, amen. And she's one of the greatest vocalists that probably has ever been in my generation. This is Lauryn Hill. She quit making albums because she felt like the music industry was using her. She released The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and she has all those, whatever those are. Those are not Oscars. They're probably Grammys. So she's performing in St. Louis. And it brought some things to my conscience about her when I saw that she was playing in St. Louis. And she wrote this song about her child named Zion. And I don't know what she is. She may be a Christian, she may be not. I haven't figured her out yet. But here's the lyrics to her song, Zion. She had the whole world opened up to her. You know, she's the little girl that sang on Sister Act. Okay? Like, this girl's been famous forever. This is the lyric to her song, Zion. It says, unsure of what the balance held. I better just read it. She's pregnant. I touched my belly, overwhelmed by what I had been chosen to perform. Her record label and her managers are pushing her to have an abortion. She said, but then an angel came one day, told me to kneel down and pray. For unto me a man-child would be born. Woe, this crazy circumstance. I knew his life deserved a chance. But everybody told me to be smart. Look at your career, they said. Lauryn, baby, use your head. But instead, I chose to use my heart. She gave birth to the child, and she actually walked away from some of the recording stuff that was what was before her. What am I saying? I'm saying that everybody has moments when they have to choose compassion. And don't just make good decisions with your head. Let your heart be involved, because Jesus is heart and Jesus changes your heart. And so we can have compassion. We should have compassion. We need to be moved with compassion. So what is compassion? Compassion is that intersection where what you love and what you hate meet. It's the gap right there where you're prompted to action, where you're prompted to passion, where you're prompted to emotion. It's where what you love and what you hate cross paths. That's where compassion is. It's love. It's mercy, it's kindness, it's forgiveness, it's reaching, it's giving, it's sharing, it's goodness, it's encouragement, it's lifting people's spirits. It's an emotional response that always results in action, and we're called to compassion. Compassion moves us. We go where people are hurting. We have a heart for our city. Like, this is a Springfield church. We care about Springfield, and we care about the Missouri Ozarks as God gives us the grace to do so. Nobody, I told you before, people, there ain't nobody meeting in Manhattan, not Manhattan, Kansas, Manhattan, New York, saying, we have to reach the Missouri Ozarks. Nobody gives a flip. If we don't give a care, nobody's going to care. We want to do our part to raise the bar and the influence that God has given us in this region. And so that means that we reach for places that have pain. We share in people's brokenness. We share in people's fear. We share in people's confusion. We are there and we're present. True passion for God always produces deep compassion for people. Can't say you love God and not love your neighbor. Somebody say, yeah. So we care. I was watching Live PD, folks. I'm telling you, I can't stop. And I'm pausing it. Where they at? Where they at, though? Where they at, though? Pausing it, going up close, like, where they at? Oh, they're over there on the west side by that Walmart. Thankfully, the west side and the south side got some love this weekend. The north side has got enough Live PD love. You know what I'm talking about? Like, can't take much more. Well, okay, on the third phone, I'm going to flip out. Okay, I love you, but you're all challenging my ADHD here. Third phone, I'm going to flip out. All right, I'm kidding, kind of. So, when I get close to the screen, like, oh, that's where they're at. They're over there. Look, we've driven down that road. Of course we've driven down that road. We live here. But when it comes to people's needs, proximity creates passion, and distance creates distortion. You can't understand what somebody's life is like if you don't love them, if you don't, like, one of the biggest things I can say about, and I'm not really harping on this, but just like, you can't just have a church you go to that has racial diversity. Your life has to have some racial diversity in it. Because you can't understand. You blame. You don't get it. I didn't get it. I still ask to make sure that I'm getting it. Because proximity creates passion, and distance creates distortion, and passion comes through closeness. If you can love people and honor people, you'll make it. This church only matters because we love people. I have never chased success. I've never chased people's pulpits to go preach somewhere. I've never chased notoriety, but I have chased me some people, calling them, where you at? I've not seen you in forever. Texting, hey, every time you miss church, Jesus kills a puppy. Threatening men. What kind of man are you? Texting a man out of the blue, somebody I know. What kind of man are you? It's tension. I don't like it, but I have passion for people that will not die. Compassion has action with it. I showed up at people's houses. Hey, love you. Why? Not because it's because Jesus is compassion. So we got to have compassion for people, and it starts at home. Say it starts at home. Compassion for your family. Passion for your family. Mother Teresa, who, if you want to get good and convicted about your life, read what Mother Teresa said. She said, it's easy to love people far away. It's not easy to love those close to us. It's easier to give a cup of rice to relieve hunger than to relieve the loneliness and pain of someone unloved in your own house. Bring love into your own home, for this is where our love for each other must start. Barbara Bush said, just reading the quotes from her life over her passing, she said, you know, what if you want to change America, and our desire is not to change our country, it's to change our world. The nations rise and fall all the time. At the same time, I love America, but she said it's what happens in your house, not the White House, that will change America. And Renee was giggling on the couch last night or the night before that. She was giggling. I was like, what are you giggling at? And she showed me a picture of Jennifer Garner, the movie star, on Instagram. And this is so great. I'm going to read it to you. She's the runway, you know, she's Jennifer Garner. Do I need to help? She's married to like Ben Affleck, right? They're divorced? Oh, I can't keep up. But she said, When your 9-year-old weaves a 12-foot long scarf on a peg loom for your birthday present, you better work, 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 work. And so there's my girl with a 12-foot long yarn, knitted, and her hashtags are work, Fashion Friday, the carpool line is my runway proud mom. Just bless me. You got to love your people. You know that song? Shower the people you know with love. Show them the way you feel. Things are gonna work out better if you only will. Have you heard that song? Never have? Sort of. Someone said, oh. Like you got to have a heart full of compassion. So when you have no compassion, trash in the landscaping of the church doesn't bother you. Restrooms that smell like somebody died doesn't bother you. Carpet stains don't even faze you if you don't care. But if you're bringing somebody who needs Jesus, you're hoping the singers are on, and you're praying the sermon doesn't suck this week because you're invested in somebody's heart being changed by God. We have to have hearts that are full of compassion for people. In church, when we gather together, church is always a 9, never a 10, because there's always somebody else that could have been here. Until there's lines getting in the door, and until there's people being turned away, church, and it's still not a 10 if we're turning people away. Church is always a 9 because there's somebody else that has a need. And if you have a need, we have a God to meet that need. So, you cannot have hard hearts and be like Jesus. C.S. Lewis said, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Say vulnerable. That's what love is. It's a position of vulnerability. I've had people that in leadership, you're going to have people that you'll invest in and then they'll turn on you and they'll walk away or they'll make you their enemy or whatever, but you can never stop investing in people because to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping your heart intact, you must give your heart to nobody. Wrap it up carefully with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements with people. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in the casket, safe, dark, and motionless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. And that's why Ephesians 4:32 tells us to be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as Christ forgave you. Understand, this is the heart of Christianity. Lamentation 3:22 says this about the compassion of the Lord Jesus, of God toward us. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. He doesn't pour out judgment on us, for his compassions never fail. This is the love of God toward us. Compassion takes thought and effort. How are they doing? Where have they been? What are they going through? I'm concerned. Are you okay? How are you doing? Like not just an emotion, but finding the right way to connect, doing the right thing at the right time, getting outside of your comfort zone to care about somebody. That's what I'm preaching about today, and that's what Jesus does to our hearts. He compels us to be risky with our extension of self. And compassion is God's compassion through us. And here's a biggie, okay? Compassion is what amateurs do, not what professionals do. You hear me? Compassion is what amateurs do, not what professionals do. If you're a paid psychologist and you see broken marriages all day long, it probably isn't going to trouble you that much when another one comes in front of you. If you're a 30-year detective on the police force, another person getting locked up for drugs, another mama crying, it ain't going to affect you. You are a professional. But this church is not full of professionals. We are amateurs. And if somebody is experiencing pain, somebody has to care. We are not a bunch of professionals. We're amateurs willing to extend ourselves, willing to share our heart, willing to extend ourselves and to live out somebody else's experience. And the church says, yeah. We recognize professionals. They're great. Doctors and counselors and therapists. Wonderful. Got to have them. Love them. But Jesus depends mostly on amateurs to show loving kindness. The word amateur is from the Latin root, which means to love. God needs people who will do it for love, not for money. Bring on the amateurs. Everybody's eligible. Everybody is needed. Just show up. Well, I don't know what to say. Join the club, people. Well, if I went, somebody died. If I went, I wouldn't know what to say. I never know what to say. Just show up. There was in Chicken Soup for the Soul, there's a story about this fellow who was a judge for a contest for the most compassionate child, and the winner was this child who was nominated by an 86-year-old neighbor who lost his wife, and a 4-year-old, or a 7-year-old, I forget what it was, came over, and they asked the man, what did this child do for you to nominate him? And he said, he didn't do anything. He just sat there with me and cried with me. The most important thing you can do for somebody that's suffering or going through a struggle is just go up to them and say, I don't know what to say, but I know how to pray, and I'm here. Folks, I've seen stuff, and there's no words. We live in a fallen world where there's lots of fragile aspects to life. We're insulated from the fragility of life, but life is fragile. And many times there are no answers. There's no healing word. There is no magic wand to make things okay. But what we do have is just our presence. And when you're going through a struggle, Jesus doesn't always give you answers, but he does comfort you with his presence. Does that make sense? Show up. Care for somebody. Be there. Be present. I remember when Pastor Eli, our Northside campus pastor, and his wife Jen, they had an emergency surgery for their son. And he was just a little guy. He's still just a little guy. And I walked up to the hospital room just to sit with him. I'll be here as long as I need to be. I'm here with you guys. Well, I wasn't the only one. About 40 people showed up. Compassion looked like being there, hugging somebody, not trying to explain anything. It looked like people bringing chicken. Zaxby's, to be specific, and iPhone chargers. Here's an iPhone charger. I know you're going to be here for a while. Here's some chicken. I bet you're hungry. That's what compassion looks like, people. And when our hearts are changed by Jesus, we think in those terms. Do you want your heart to be hard, or do you want a heart that reflects the love and care and concern of Jesus Christ? Decide it in your heart right now. We live in a harsh world. We live in a hard world. We live in a world where there's a lot of pain. We live in a world where there's a lot of brokenness. We live in a world where I'm not a gloom and doom guy, but dear God, read the paper, stuff happens, and and here's the thing. We never institutionalize our care for hurting people. You understand that? What's the church doing? If you want to be punched in the face, ask me that question. I'm joking, sort of. I'm not going to punch anybody in the face, but that makes me so mad. What's the church doing? You think we got like a room with 100 people during the week just sitting there waiting to be told to go do something? No, we don't institutionalize our care and concern for others. We serve with our hearts. Your passion cannot become my ministry. You are the church, and members in particular. You are empowered. Jesus Christ dwells in your heart by faith. Care for somebody. Show up. Extend yourself. Buy a gift card. Make a meal. Put together a Frito pie. Not for me. For others. They like that kind of thing. Love somebody. Because Jesus is compassion. Every head bow, every eye closed. I love you all so much. And Jesus Christ is here right now. His word should cause us to be awake. The word today should cause us to look deep within and ask ourselves this question: has my heart become hard? Have I become a professional, or am I still living out the kind of love that amateurs possess? Are you just loving with your words? Are you telling people you'll pray, but you never do? When you tell somebody you're going to pray, you got to pray with your heart and soul engaged. Don't tell somebody you're going to pray and don't. Jesus is compassion. And His Spirit is forever and continually changing our hearts. And I feel so anxious about this. I overstated some things. I'm already playing those through in my head right now. But what matters most is that we don't give ourselves the license to let somebody else do it. Jesus is compassion. Jesus dwells in your heart by faith. You and I are the hands and feet in love of Jesus that our world will see. Awaken us, God, to bring the culture of Christ from heaven to earth. Convict us, God. Draw us. Let your hand be upon us. Help us, Lord, to be hungry for you and to be aware of your presence, to be aware of the needs of others. And in these next few moments, Jesus, I pray that hearts would be changed. In these next few moments as we worship and then as Renee prays, I pray, Lord, that there'll be many people that will surrender their lives to Jesus Christ and receive the compassion of the Lord and have hearts that are transformed. Let this be, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.